Condescension is expensive when you mock someone whose family owns everything you're standing on. Byung-suk So learned that lesson outside the Grandeur Hotel in Chicago, when he told an intern to take a taxi like normal people instead of accepting a ride in his luxury vehicle, never realizing Shannon Jones's uncle owned the entire taxi fleet servicing downtown Chicago, owned the Grandeur Hotel where Byung-suk was conducting business meetings, and was standing 30 feet away watching his niece being humiliated by someone who thought status meant you could treat service workers with contempt. The story started 3 months earlier, when Shannon Jones took an internship at Stellar Hospitality Group, a multinational hotel management company headquartered in Chicago. Shannon was 23, had just completed her MBA from Northwestern University, was using the internship to gain operational experience in hospitality management before transitioning into executive roles. She came from substantial wealth. Her family owned Jones Transportation Services, one of the largest privately held ground transportation companies in the Midwest, plus significant real estate holdings throughout Chicago. But Shannon had deliberately kept her family background private during the internship application process. She'd used her mother's maiden name on her resume, hadn't mentioned her family's business interests, presented herself as talented graduate student rather than as heiress to substantial fortune. She wanted to be evaluated based on her own capabilities rather than on her family connections. She wanted authentic professional experience where people treated her as intern rather than as potential business partner whose family controlled resources they might need. The strategy had worked. She'd been hired as regular intern, assigned to assist with operations management, treated exactly like any other entry-level employee rather than as someone with powerful family connections. Byung-suk So was 36, vice president of strategic development for Stellar Hospitality Group. He'd been with the company for 8 years, had risen quickly through combination of aggressive business development and political maneuvering that sometimes crossed into bullying behavior towards subordinates. He was Korean American, had attended prestigious business schools, carried himself with arrogance that came from being successful in competitive corporate environment. He was skilled at managing up, impressing executives and board members, while being casually cruel to people he perceived as beneath his status. Shannon had been assigned to support one of Byung-suk's strategic projects, evaluation of potential hotel acquisitions in the Chicago market. Her role was essentially administrative, scheduling meetings, preparing briefing materials, coordinating logistics for site visits. Byung-suk had treated her with casual dismissiveness from the beginning. He didn't learn her name for the first 2 weeks, referring to her as the intern in all communications. He gave her assignments with unrealistic deadlines and minimal guidance, then criticized the results. He made comments about her appearance and her background that would have been problematic coming from any supervisor but were especially inappropriate given the power dynamic. Shannon had tolerated the treatment because she was gathering information about how the company actually operated, about which executives were competent versus which were just politically skilled, about whether Stellar Hospitality Group was an organization her family might want to do business with. The situation reached its crisis point during a site visit to evaluate a hotel property that Stellar Hospitality was considering acquiring. The property was the Grandeur Hotel, a luxury property in downtown Chicago that had been struggling financially and was potentially available for acquisition at favorable price. Byung-suk had organized comprehensive site visit including tours of the facilities, meetings with current management, financial review sessions, and dinner with potential investors interested in participating in the acquisition. Shannon had been responsible for coordinating all the logistics, scheduling the tours, arranging the meetings, booking the dinner venue, organizing transportation for all the participants. She'd done all of this competently despite Byung-suk's minimal guidance and last-minute changes to the schedule. The site visit had gone smoothly, all the participants had arrived on time, the meetings had been productive. At the end of the day, the group was gathering outside the Grandeur Hotel to head to dinner. Byung-suk had arranged for luxury car service to transport the senior executives and potential investors, black sedans that would convey appropriate status for the business dinner. The vehicles arrived and Byung-suk started directing people to the cars. He assigned the senior executives and investors to the luxury sedans, making sure everyone important was accommodated comfortably. Then he noticed Shannon standing with the group, clearly expecting to attend the dinner as she'd been involved in all the preparations. "The dinner is for decision makers and investors," Byung-suk said dismissively. Interns don't need to attend. You can head home. I've been coordinating all the logistics for this acquisition evaluation. I thought I'd attend the dinner to provide support if needed and to learn from the strategic discussions. You've done your job coordinating logistics. That doesn't mean you belong at the strategic dinner. This is for people who actually matter to the deal, not for administrative support. I'm not just administrative support. I'm an MBA intern assigned to learn about strategic development. You're an intern who's here to do what you're told. Right now I'm telling you that you're not needed at the dinner. Take a taxi home like normal people instead of expecting to ride in luxury vehicles reserved for executives. That's appropriate level of transportation for your position. The comment, "take a taxi like normal people," was delivered with casual cruelty that made several executives uncomfortable. It was unnecessarily harsh dismissal that revealed BM-Suk's fundamental contempt for anyone he perceived as lower status. What BM-Suk didn't know was that Marcus Jones, Shannon's uncle and CEO of Jones Transportation Services, was standing 30 feet away near the hotel entrance, having just arrived for a separate business meeting. Marcus had seen the entire interaction. Had watched BM-Suk dismiss his niece with casual cruelty. Had heard the comment about taking a taxi like normal people as though using ground transportation was beneath the status of someone important. The irony was exquisite. BM-Suk was telling Shannon to take a taxi, apparently unaware that her family owned the largest taxi and ground transportation fleet in Chicago. He was standing outside the Grandeur Hotel, apparently unaware that Shannon's family had significant ownership stake in the property through their real estate holdings. Marcus walked over to the group with deliberate purpose. "Mr. So," he said, addressing BM-Suk directly. "I'm Marcus Jones, CEO of Jones Transportation Services. I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about transportation arrangements." BM-Suk recognized the name. Jones Transportation was major provider of ground transportation for Stellar Hospitality's Chicago properties. This was important business relationship. "Mr. Jones, pleasure to meet you. We appreciate the excellent service your company provides to our hotels." "I appreciate that. I notice you've arranged luxury car service for your dinner this evening." "Those are actually my vehicles. Jones Transportation provides the fleet you're using. Excellent service as always. Your company is very reliable." "I'm glad you think so. I also noticed you suggested that my niece Shannon should take a taxi home like normal people rather than riding with your executive group to dinner." BM-Suk's expression shifted from professional friendliness to confused concern. "Your niece? Shannon Jones. The intern you just dismissed with instructions to take a taxi. She's my brother's daughter. And yes, I do think she should take one of our taxis. We own the entire fleet servicing downtown Chicago. But I'm curious why you think using ground transportation is somehow beneath the status of executives while being appropriate for interns you're casually humiliating." The executives and investors who were watching this interaction were very quiet, clearly uncomfortable with the revelation that BM-Suk had just insulted someone from a family with significant business connections and resources. "I didn't realize Shannon was related to your family." "Obviously not. If you'd known her family owned major transportation and real estate holdings, you probably would have treated her with the respect you're showing me right now. But the fact that you didn't know her background before dismissing her reveals something important about your judgment. You treat people with respect only when you think they have power or resources you need to care about. I was just making appropriate decisions about who should attend the strategic dinner. You were humiliating an intern you perceived as powerless by telling her to take a taxi like normal people while you rode in luxury vehicles her family owns. That's not strategic decision-making, that's casual cruelty enabled by your assumption that she had no recourse against your treatment." Shannon had been standing quietly during this exchange, watching BM-Suk's growing discomfort. Now she spoke up. "Uncle Marcus, I appreciate you standing up for me. But I should clarify, I deliberately didn't disclose my family connections during the internship application. I wanted to be evaluated based on my own capabilities rather than on our family's resources. The fact that Mr. So has been treating me dismissively all summer is actually valuable information about his character and his judgment." Marcus smiled slightly. "That's very mature perspective. Though I notice you're still standing here instead of attending the dinner you helped organize. Mr. So indicated that strategic dinners are for decision-makers and investors, not for interns who are just administrative support. I was just following his instructions about my appropriate level. I see. Well, as a significant investor in Chicago real estate including ownership stake in this very hotel we're standing in front of, I'd be interested in attending your strategic dinner. And I think Shannon should join us. After all, she coordinated all the logistics and she should learn from the strategic discussions. That was the purpose of her internship, correct? Byung-suk looked trapped. Refusing Marcus Jones's request to attend would be insulting a major business partner and real estate investor. But accepting meant having to include Shannon at a dinner he'd just explicitly excluded her from. Of course you're both welcome to join us. I apologize for the confusion about Shannon's role. I should have been clearer about the dinner attendance expectations. There was no confusion, Marcus said calmly. You very clearly told her she wasn't needed because she was just administrative support who should take a taxi home like normal people. You're only reconsidering now that you know her family owns the taxis and the building. That's not confusion, that's recalibration based on newly discovered information about who has power you need to respect. One of the senior executives from Stellar Hospitality who'd been watching this entire exchange intervened, clearly trying to salvage the deteriorating situation. Mr. Jones, we're very glad you can join us for dinner. Shannon, of course you should attend as well. Your work on coordinating this site visit has been excellent and you absolutely deserve to participate in the strategic discussions. The group moved toward the vehicles. Marcus and Shannon rode together in one of the luxury sedans from Jones Transportation's fleet. Byung-suk rode separately, clearly shaken by the encounter. During the dinner, Marcus made several pointed observations about the importance of treating all employees with respect regardless of their position, about how character revealed itself in how people treated those they perceived as powerless, about how successful businesses required leaders who valued contributions rather than just status. Everyone at the table understood these comments were directed at Byung-suk's treatment of Shannon, though Marcus was diplomatic enough to make the points generally rather than singling him out explicitly. After dinner, as the group was departing, Marcus pulled Byung-suk aside for private conversation. I want to clarify something about this evening. You weren't wrong to make decisions about who should attend strategic dinners, that's appropriate exercise of your role. What was wrong was how you communicated that decision to Shannon. Telling her to take a taxi like normal people was gratuitous cruelty designed to make her feel small. That reveals concerning things about your judgment and your character. I apologize if my communication was inappropriate. You're apologizing because you discovered she has family connections you need to respect. But the apology should be for the casual cruelty towards someone you thought was powerless, not for accidentally being cruel to someone whose family has resources. Do you understand the difference? I understand. I'm not sure you do. You've spent this evening being very respectful toward me while continuing to largely ignore Shannon unless you're forced to acknowledge her by the social situation. That suggests you still see her as the dismissed intern rather than as a professional who coordinated an excellent site visit and who happens to come from a family with substantial business interests. What would you like me to do to address this situation? I'd like you to actually learn from it. Not just change your behavior toward Shannon because you now know her family background, but actually examine the pattern where you treat people with respect only when you think they have power you need to care about. That pattern will limit your effectiveness as leader and it will create liability for your organization when you inevitably misjudge who has power and who doesn't. 2 weeks after the incident at the Grandeur Hotel, Shannon submitted her resignation from the internship at Stellar Hospitality Group. Her exit interview was conducted by the head of human resources, who'd been briefed on the incident with Byung-suk. Can you explain your reasons for leaving before completing the internship term? I've gathered the information I needed about how this organization operates and how its leadership treats employees. That information suggests Stellar Hospitality Group isn't the kind of organization my family should partner with on strategic initiatives. Are you leaving because of Mr. So's treatment of you? I'm leaving because Mr. So's treatment of me revealed cultural problems that extend beyond just one executive's behavior. He's been with your company for 8 years and he's risen to VP level despite having a well-known pattern of being dismissive towards subordinates. That suggests the organization tolerates or even rewards the kind of behavior he demonstrated. We're addressing the situation with Mr. So. He's been counseled about appropriate treatment of interns and junior employees. He's been counseled because he accidentally dismissed someone whose family has business resources his organization needs to respect. That's not genuine culture change, that's damage control. If I'd actually been the powerless intern he assumed I was, there would be no counseling and no consequences for his behavior. What would it take for you to reconsider your resignation? Nothing. I'm not interested in continuing the internship. But I would suggest that your organization examine whether the leadership qualities you're promoting actually serve your long-term strategic interests. Mr. So is skilled at managing up and impressing executives. But he's terrible at developing talent, building teams, and treating people with dignity. Those weaknesses will create problems eventually, even if they haven't created visible consequences yet. Shannon's resignation was noted by several executives who understood that losing an intern wouldn't normally matter, but that losing this particular intern had implications for the relationship with Jones Transportation Services and for potential real estate partnerships with the Jones family holdings. 3 months after Shannon's departure, Stellar Hospitality Group's acquisition bid for the Grandeur Hotel was rejected in favor of a competing offer. The competing offer came from a consortium that included Jones Family Real Estate Holdings as a significant investor. The business press covered the acquisition with particular attention to how Stellar Hospitality had been outbid for a property they'd been evaluating for months. Sources familiar with the situation suggest that Stellar Hospitality's bid was disadvantaged by strained relationships with key Chicago business families, including the Jones family, which controls major transportation and real estate assets in the downtown market. BMSUC faced questions from senior leadership about how the acquisition had been lost despite months of careful evaluation and relationship building. The Jones family decided to back a competing bid. I believe this was influenced by a personal incident involving Shannon Jones during her internship with our company. What personal incident? There was a misunderstanding about dinner attendance during the site visit. Shannon felt excluded from strategic discussions. Her uncle Marcus Jones was present and took offense at how the situation was handled. So we lost a major acquisition opportunity because you mishandled an interaction with an intern who happened to be from a connected family? That's an oversimplification. It's an accurate summary. You treated an intern dismissively without bothering to learn anything about her background or her family's business interests. That casual dismissiveness cost us this acquisition and potentially damaged our relationships with one of the most important business families in Chicago. That's catastrophic failure of judgment. 6 months after the Grandeur Hotel incident, BMSUC was removed from his role as VP of Strategic Development. The official explanation was organizational restructuring and strategic realignment. The actual reason was that his pattern of treating subordinates dismissively had finally created consequences expensive enough that senior leadership could no longer ignore it. Your treatment of Shannon Jones revealed judgment problems we can no longer overlook, the CEO explained during the termination meeting. You're skilled at impressing executives and managing upward relationships. But you're terrible at building teams, developing talent, and recognizing when someone you're dismissing might have resources or connections that matter. That combination of skills and weaknesses is too risky for the VP level. One incident with an intern shouldn't define my entire career. It's not one incident. It's a pattern we've been aware of for years but haven't addressed because you were generating results. The Shannon Jones incident just made the pattern too expensive to ignore. You insulted someone whose family owns major assets in our operating market, and that insult cost us an acquisition opportunity. That's measurable consequence for behavior we should have addressed earlier. What happens now? We're offering you a severance package that includes 6 months' salary and benefits. You'll be leaving the company effective immediately. We'll provide neutral references that confirm your employment dates and title without commenting on the circumstances of your departure. BMSUC left Stellar Hospitality Group after 8 years, his career trajectory halted by his inability to treat people with dignity when he perceived them as powerless. Shannon completed her MBA, joined her family's business operations, and within 3 years was managing major strategic initiatives for Jones Transportation Services and the family's real estate portfolio. The Grandeur Hotel, acquired by the consortium including Jones Family Holdings, was successfully renovated and repositioned as one of Chicago's premier luxury properties. 5 years after telling Shannon to take a taxi like normal people, Byung-suk was working at a mid-sized hospitality consulting firm, having never recovered the career momentum he'd lost when his casual cruelty toward an intern proved to be an expensive mistake. He gave an interview reflecting on what had happened. "I destroyed a promising career because I treated an intern dismissively without bothering to learn anything about her background. I assumed she was powerless and I treated her with contempt that I thought would have no consequences. Turned out her family owned the taxis I told her to take and the building I was standing in front of when I dismissed her. That miscalculation cost my company an acquisition opportunity and cost me my position. Do you think you would have treated her differently if you'd known her family background from the beginning?" "Absolutely. If I'd known she was Marcus Jones's niece, I would have treated her with the respect I showed her uncle. That's actually the problem. I treated people with respect only when I thought they had power or resources I needed to care about. Shannon had both, I just didn't know it." "What did you learn from the experience?" "That you should treat everyone with dignity regardless of their perceived status or power, because you never know when the person you're dismissing has connections or resources you've failed to identify. It's both morally right and strategically necessary to treat people well regardless of what you think they can do for you or to you." "That sounds like you learned the instrumental lesson rather than the moral lesson." "What do you mean?" "You learned that being dismissive is risky because people might have hidden power. That's calculating the costs and benefits of decent behavior. The moral lesson would be that people deserve dignity regardless of whether they have power, regardless of whether dismissing them might have consequences." "Have you learned that lesson or just the risk management version?" Byung-suk was quiet for a moment. "I think I'm still learning the moral lesson. The risk management version came immediately. I understood right away that I'd made a strategic error by dismissing someone whose family had resources. But actually internalizing that people deserve respect regardless of their power? That's harder transformation that I'm still working on." "Why is it harder?" "Because my entire career was built on managing relationships based on power calculations. I was good at impressing people who could help me and I was dismissive of people who couldn't. That approach worked for 8 years until I miscalculated who had power. Breaking that pattern requires not just acknowledging it was strategically wrong but actually believing that people have inherent worth regardless of what they can do for my career. That's deeper change than just being more careful about whose niece I'm dismissing." The case became teaching example in business ethics courses about the importance of treating all people with dignity regardless of their perceived status. The Byung-suk case illustrates how instrumental approaches to ethics, treating people well because it might benefit you, are both morally inadequate and strategically unreliable. Byung-suk tried to calculate who deserved respect based on who had power he needed to care about. That calculation failed when he encountered someone whose power wasn't immediately visible. A genuinely ethical approach would treat everyone with dignity regardless of calculations about their power or resources. Shannon, when asked about the incident years later, focused on the systemic issues rather than on Byung-suk individually. What happened with Mr. So revealed cultural problems at Stellar Hospitality that extended beyond one executive's behavior. Organizations that reward people for managing up while being dismissive to subordinates create environments where incidents like mine are inevitable. Someone eventually miscalculates who has power, dismisses the wrong person, and creates consequences expensive enough that leadership has to address patterns they've been tolerating. Do you think Byung-suk has genuinely changed or just become more careful about whose family background he verifies before being dismissive? I don't know him well enough to judge his internal transformation. But structurally, the fact that he was removed from his position sends important signal. Organizations will eventually face consequences for tolerating leaders who treat people poorly. Whether individual leaders actually change their values or just their behavior is less important than whether organizations create accountability for dismissive treatment of employees regardless of those employees' family connections. What would you tell young professionals who might find themselves in similar situations, being dismissed or mistreated by superiors? Document everything, maintain your professionalism, and recognize that how people treat you when they think you're powerless reveals their actual character. If you have resources or connections you can leverage, use them strategically. But more importantly, remember that organizations that tolerate this kind of treatment aren't places you want to build long-term careers, even if you could force them to treat you better through family connections. That's surprisingly forgiving toward the organization given how you were treated. It's not forgiving, it's strategic assessment. Stellar Hospitality's culture tolerated Suk's dismissiveness for 8 years because he generated results. They only addressed it when it became expensive. That tells me the organization's values are driven by consequences rather than by principles. I don't want to work for organizations like that even if I could force them to treat me well. 10 years after the incident, Marcus Jones reflected on what he'd observed and how he'd responded. Watching Shannon being dismissed like that was infuriating. My instinct was to immediately shut down Suk and make him understand exactly who he was dealing with. But Shannon handled it perfectly. She maintained her composure, she documented the pattern of treatment, and she used the incident as data point about organizational culture rather than as personal affront requiring revenge. Did you want revenge? Absolutely. But Shannon was right that revenge wasn't the valuable outcome. The valuable outcome was understanding that Stellar Hospitality wasn't an organization worth partnering with, and using our resources to support competing bids rather than trying to force them to work with us after they'd demonstrated their values. Some people would say you did take revenge by backing the competing bid for the Grandeur Hotel. That wasn't revenge. That was business decision based on accurate assessment of Stellar Hospitality's reliability as partner. They'd demonstrated that their leadership made decisions based on status calculations rather than on actual merit or professional competence. That's not a partner you want for long-term strategic initiatives regardless of personal incidents. What would you tell other family members of young professionals who might witness similar treatment? Let them handle it unless they ask for support. Shannon was managing the situation professionally and gathering useful information. My intervention was only necessary because Suk had crossed line from dismissiveness into public humiliation. Even then, Shannon used my presence strategically rather than asking me to solve the problem for her. That showed mature judgment that served her better than if I'd just immediately leveraged family resources to force different treatment. The building where it happened, the Grandeur Hotel, remained successful property under Jones Family Consortium ownership, managed by a team that valued competence and dignity rather than status calculations. Shannon's internship photo was sometimes referenced in hospitality industry discussions about the importance of treating all employees well regardless of their perceived position, about how casual cruelty can have unexpected consequences, about why character matters more than political skill in long-term leadership success. The story of the intern told to take a taxi by someone who didn't know her family owned the fleet became cautionary tale about assumptions, about status, about the danger of treating people with respect only when you think they have power you need to care about. The executive who thought telling someone to take a taxi was appropriate dismissal of someone beneath his status, unaware he was standing in a building her family owned while suggesting she use transportation her family controlled. The intern who deliberately hidden her family connections to get authentic information about organizational culture, who maintained professional composure while being publicly humiliated, who used the incident as data rather than as excuse for revenge. Both of them proving that condescension is expensive when you mock someone whose family owns everything you're standing on, that status calculations are unreliable when you don't actually know who has power, and that character reveals itself most clearly in how people treat those they perceive as powerless.